I want to extend a thank you to Marvin Smith, who is the IUPUI Director of Student Financial Services, who helped in the implementation and the conceptualization of the Homestretch Award program, and also to Michelle Hansen, who's the IUPUI Director of Institutional Research and Decision Support, who's helped us by doing the data analysis. We do have a research brief that covers this information, and if you're interested in receiving that brief, if you contact me at the email address that's on the slide, we'd be happy to send you that information. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tim. We'll do questions after.
Yeah, good morning. I think there was a famous line from Dirty Dancing. Nobody puts baby in the corner. Apparently at the JW Marriott, they have a different philosophy. Good morning, I'm Tim Rennick from Georgia State University. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Panther Retention Grant Program that we've instituted at Georgia State. It's been running now fully for 4 years, and it's been scaled quite large. So in that 4-year period, we've given 6,300 grants over the time period. So let's talk a little bit about the motivation. Like the other panelists and their institutions, Georgia State University largely serves an at-risk student population. We're a large urban research university in downtown Atlanta. We're 63% non-white. We have just under 60% of our students who are on Pell Grants. That Pell number has basically doubled over the last 6 years since the onset of the recession. And we are very committed to student success and to try to find different models that are going to work with the kind of students we are serving. And I think the motivation for this program really came out of an analysis of the data. And if you're not asking those kind of questions at your campuses and looking at what the data say in response, I would recommend that you start doing so, because we had a problem. We were working year-round to try to get students to qualify for their classes, to meet prerequisites, get them through their math requirements, get them through their lab sequences and so forth. We were also working very hard to try to motivate the students to stay enrolled. You know, we talked already this morning about 15 to finish type programs and so forth, which are all about trying to get students to have the right mindset and to apply themselves. And we were dropping over 1,000 students a semester during the first week of classes for non-payment of tuition and fees. Now, part of the context here that may be a little different in Georgia than in other states is we have a particularly hard-nosed set of policies, state policies that we're under. The Attorney General ruled a decade ago that if we allow students to stay enrolled in the classes past the first week of classes who still owe us tuition and fees, that's an illegal gratuity. And so we're actually forced to drop the students who haven't paid 100% of their tuition and fees at the end of the first week of classes. And it was a self-defeating proposition, because these were the students who had passed those 2 hurdles I was just mentioning. They have met all their prerequisites, they're registered for classes, and 2, they want to be there, they're in the classroom, and we're basically pulling the rug out from under them. And when we drilled down and looked at the data, so we asked the simple question, who are these students, and is there some way to help them? We found that some of them were beyond our reach. These were out-of-state students, in some cases owing $8,000 or $9,000 and so forth. But what we were particularly intrigued about were a couple other characteristics of a different subset of the students. The biggest group by far of these students were seniors, and when we looked at that, the not surprising reason that more seniors than other classes of students were involved in the group is they were running out of aid. Georgia has a large program, the Hope Scholarship Program, wonderful resource that helps students, especially low-income students, to be able to afford to go to a place like Georgia State, but it only covers 127 credit hours. So many students, you drop a couple courses, you fail a couple courses, and you're going to run out of that scholarship before you reach the point of meeting your bachelor's requirements. The other thing we found was that there was a significant number of these students who owed a relatively small amount. In fact, the first time I presented it, the data to some of the upper-level administrators, they couldn't believe that students were getting dropped from classes who owed $200, who owed $300. And why? You certainly can pull together that kind of resource, but the reality is that they couldn't. The average Pell family in America last year came from a household with an income of $22,000 a year. That's 60% of our undergraduates. If household income is $22,000 a year, in many cases considerably lower than that, those $200 or $300 may as well be $2,000 or $3,000. The students were not coming up with the money, and they were getting dropped in large numbers. So we initiated this program back in 2011. We use very simple criteria. It's not a merit-based scholarship at all. Students have to be progressing towards graduation by our academic analytics, and we can talk more about those if you want to hear more. And then the other thing is they have to have unmet need. And other than that, we are willing to give the grant to the student within limits. And our limits are similar to those at Akron. We actually put the guideline at about $1,500. Next slide. So what have we seen? We started very small, fall of 2011. We had a gift from the president and his wife for $40,000. We gave out 41 of these grants. As I alluded to a few minutes ago, we've given out now, after 4 years, almost 6,300 of these grants. The average grant is only $900. And what we found, even as we've scaled this program up to 41 students the first semester to over 1,000 students who are giving these grants to now every semester now, the impact has remained largely the same. So what we're finding is that 1 year after getting the grant, over 80% of the students have either graduated, and of course the subset of the seniors, those are the candidates who have often graduated after a year, or they're still enrolled. We consider that a very positive metric given that these are the most at-risk financial students that we enroll, that we're retaining them at an 83% clip. For the subset of the recipients who are seniors, just under 70% are graduating within 2 semesters. And when we ran our conferrals, bachelor's conferral numbers last year, there were almost 700 students who received these grants that had graduated in the past year. You talk about low-hanging fruit. We have so many student success programs across our universities, and they're warranted and needed, that work with students to increase their math skills, to get them through remedial programs and so forth. Here's $900 late in the game in many cases for the students that can get them over the hump and get them graduated. And as you heard from Akron, we've had a really positive ROI with these grants. The average grant we gave last year was $900, as you can see on the screen. The average student bill was $2,300, who we supported via one of these grants. That means 2 things. One, we're immediately getting back the $900, 100% of it, because the grants we give cover tuition and fees alone. So that immediately comes back to us. But we also get $1,400 additional dollars from each of these students that otherwise would have been wiped out because they've put money in via loans, via their own contribution and so forth towards their bill. So it makes a huge difference in our numbers, a huge difference in the life of the students. We do actually require all the students to sign a contract. We actually make them sign a physical contract. We want them to come into an office and recognize there's some obligation here, but it's a very simple obligation. They have to sit down and meet with an academic advisor, and they have to sit down and meet with a financial counselor. For the students who are seniors and graduating, the counseling is about paying off loans and debts and understanding financial obligations down the road. For the non-seniors, the counseling is about how you can go about making the right choices to afford to pay for the rest of your academic degree. And I think I have one last slide here. Yes? So what does all this mean? What we found with these kind of interventions, and this is important for all of us to recognize, is that they have a disproportionately positive effect upon the at-risk student populations. So this is largely the trajectory the year before we went with the Panther grants, and then since then. Now, in all honesty, as some of you know, we've been doing a whole suite of different programs. We've moved to predictive analytics tracking and advising and so forth. But still, the numbers are particularly compelling, that the students we're helping with these kind of interventions, proactive interventions that level the playing field between low-income students and their middle and upper-class counterparts, are disproportionately positive towards the at-risk student populations. The time period we're talking about here, between basically 10 and 15, overall Georgia State is conferring 30% more bachelor's degrees, but all of the gains, as you can see, are coming out of the at-risk populations. And look at those Pell numbers. In the last 12 months, between 2014 and 15, we're conferring 450 more degrees to Pell students. This program, these retention grants, are a critical part of those successes. Thank you.
Both Rebecca and Tim, could you talk a little bit about staffing? What does it take to pull this grant off every year, and who's responsible for following up to make sure students do what they're supposed to do? How does that work?
Yeah, it's actually a very lean program. As Stacy described at Akron, we make the ultimate decision for whether to grant one of these grants or not. It boils down to two people. It's our Director of Financial Aid and our Associate Vice President for Student Success. They're the ones who can pull the trigger. Now, that doesn't mean they have to look at all 1,000 cases every year, because there are some clear cases that we just roll out. We have a scholarship office already in place, and that's the ground zero for the contract signings and so forth, to get the students come in and recognize that they have this obligation. But as you've heard from some of the other panelists, while we don't have students apply for these grants, these are data-driven grants. The awards come from us looking at the data. We do encourage the whole campus community to recognize these resources out there. If they're faculty or the staff who encounter students who are facing these kind of problems, they can make nominations, and almost always those nominations result in a grant being awarded.
For the Homestretch Award portion, that was incorporated into the normal financial aid awarding process, so that the selection process was run using the stated metrics to identify the students, and then a determination made on the level of aid that would be provided based on the unmet need. So it did not substantially impact the staffing that was required. For the coaching part of the program, we used academic advisors who were paid a supplement of $1,000 over the 2 semesters, so $500 each semester, as an addition to their academic advising activities.
Let's open it up to everyone. Any questions for any of the panelists? Go ahead and just stand up and grab a microphone.
Good morning, Kevin Carmen, University of Nevada, Reno. Thank you all for your presentations. They're inspiring and very impactful. Skeptics at programs like this will claim that students will game the system, that if you have these out there, that they will intentionally perhaps find a way to get those resources. And I'm trying to promote this on my own home campus, but I'd like to hear from you how you promote or don't promote these programs publicly, and what answer you have of the skeptics who would say that students are just gaming the system to get the funds.
Yeah, that argument came up often as we were launching the program, and a couple responses I would make, actually there's some donors to the program who were swayed by these type of arguments. The first one is, imagine that a student is gaming the system in the circumstance of these Panther retention grants. We are vetting that by federal standards, these students have genuine unmet need. So the federal government has said that by the full cost of an education at Georgia State and by the amount of packaging we can put together for the student, they're falling short. We're also vetting by our academic analytics that this student is doing everything they need to graduate. They may not be an honors student, but they're plugging away, taking the right courses, getting the right grades, on path for graduation. So they get the $900 when they could have covered it themselves. How is that really different from most of the scholarship models and the programs we already have in place at our institution? We have all kinds of donors who are perfectly happy if we could identify those students reliably as freshmen coming in to say, I'll establish, I'll endow, I'll support some kind of scholarship for these type of students. So the gaming in this kind of situation is